Alexander Thorne's fingers traced the edge of his father's mahogany desk, the smooth surface still holding the warmth of decades of deals and decisions. At 45, he commanded his own biotech empire. Yet, standing in the study, he felt the weight of a legacy that made his achievements seem modest in comparison. $2 billion in carefully concealed global investments, his father's true masterpiece. The funeral reception buzzed with quiet conversation beyond the study's closed doors. His wife, Grace, had orchestrated the entire affair with her characteristic precision. Every detail was executed to perfection. Even now, he could hear her melodious laugh, perfectly calibrated to soothe the gathered mourners without seeming inappropriate for the occasion. Alexander picked up a framed photo from the desk, himself and his father at the twins' birth. His father's expression, which he had always read as joy, now seemed to hold something else. Concern. Suspicion. Mr. Thorne. The quiet voice belonged to Harrison Wells, his father's private investigator for the past 2 decades. The man's weathered face held none of the professional detachment he usually maintained. A moment of your time. Alexander gestured to one of the leather chairs. Of course, Harrison, please. Wells remained standing, reaching into his jacket to withdraw a small USB drive. Your father, he had concerns. 6 months ago, he asked me to look into certain matters regarding Mrs. Thorne's background. Alexander's hand closed around the drive. What kind of concerns? Wells glanced at the door, lowering his voice further. He noticed things about the twins, small things at first, but when he started comparing their baby photos to recent ones, he shook his head. The information's all there, sir. I documented everything meticulously. Through the study's doorway, Alexander caught a glimpse of his children. Olivia and Liam, both 16 years old, stood in the corner of the reception room, heads bent over their phones. Their features had changed subtly over the past year, changes he had attributed to teenage development. But now, studying them with new eyes, he noticed how those changes had shifted them further from his own appearance. The timing of this seems significant, Harrison. Wells nodded grimly. Your father contacted me the day after the twins' annual physical. Something in their medical records troubled him deeply. But before we could complete the investigation, he left the sentence hanging. Alexander slipped the drive into his pocket. Thank you, Harrison. I trust you'll remain available if I have questions. Of course, sir. And then, hesitating at the door, Wells added, Be careful who you trust with this information. Your father suspected the corruption went deep. After Wells left, Alexander turned to his computer and inserted the drive with steady hands that belied the storm brewing inside him. His father's digital diary opened before him, meticulously organized with dates, observations, and attached files. The first entry was dated 6 months ago. Noticed discrepancies in O and L's latest blood work. Genetic markers don't align with family history. G's behavior increasingly suspicious. Regular charity meetings in Switzerland coincide with unusual bank transfers. Alexander scrolled through months of observations, each more damning than the last. Grace's unexplained absences were always explained away with foundation work. The twins' subtle physical changes were noted, but it was the encrypted emails that made his blood run cold, messages between Grace and an anonymous Swiss account dating back 17 years, just before their marriage. His father's final entry was dated 3 days before his death. Confirmation received from clinic source. Must tell Alexander everything. Meeting scheduled for. The entry ended abruptly. A knock at the study door interrupted his reading. Grace stood in the doorway, elegant and as beautiful as during her supermodel days. Darling, people are asking for you. The governor just arrived, she said. Alexander closed the laptop, sliding naturally into the role of the grieving son. Of course, we can't keep him waiting. Grace's perfectly manicured hand touched his arm. You're handling this so well, my love. Your father would be proud. Would he? Alexander wondered, studying his wife's flawless features. Or would he be screaming warnings from beyond the grave? The twins seemed distracted. He commented, watching her reaction. "They're teenagers, darling. Grief affects them differently." Grace's smile held the same camera-ready perfection it always did. "They have a video call with their foundation mentor later. Perhaps that will help." Swiss mentor, correct. Alexander kept his tone casual. Dr. Weber has been wonderful with them." Grace steered him toward the door. "Come now. We shouldn't keep our guests waiting." Alexander allowed himself to be guided back to the reception, his mind racing. Dr. Weber. Another Swiss connection, another thread to unravel. Later that night, after the guests had departed, and the house had grown quiet, Alexander returned to his father's study. The USB drive contained more than just the diary. There were financial records, surveillance photos, and most intriguingly, fragments of recovered emails between Grace and her Swiss contact. One partial message caught his attention. Genetic markers holding stable. Annual adjustments proceeding as planned. Payment schedule remains. The rest was corrupted, but it was enough. Alexander reached for his phone and scrolled to a familiar name. "Daniel, I need you to look into something." Discreetly. "A genetics lab called Helix Solutions. Yes, I know it's late, but this can't wait until morning. And Daniel, don't tell anyone about this. Not even your partners." He ended the call, turning to stare at a family portrait on the wall. Grace, radiant as ever. The twins, their features a perfect blend of our genetics or something engineered in a Swiss laboratory. "What did you discover, Dad?" he whispered to the empty study. "And what did it cost you?" Daniel Morrison's office occupied the top floor of a discreet Manhattan building, the space reflecting decades of handling sensitive legal matters for New York's elite. Alexander sat across from his childhood friend, watching him examine documents spread across his desk. "This is Daniel," he said, removing his glasses and rubbing his eyes. "Alex, this is beyond anything I've seen in 30 years of practice. Tell me, Helix Solutions wasn't just any genetics lab. They were pioneers in reproductive technology, pushing boundaries that made most of the scientific community uncomfortable." Daniel selected a particular file. Their license revocation wasn't just about ethical violations. There were serious concerns about their IVF procedures. Alexander leaned forward. "And their lead researcher, Dr. Catherine Pierce, a brilliant scientist, ambitious to a fault. She vanished 16 years ago, with approximately $20 million in research funds." Daniel's expression darkened. "The timing, Alex, it's not a coincidence. The twins were born that year." "Yes, and within weeks of Pierce's disappearance, a new fertility clinic opened in Switzerland, very exclusive clientele." Daniel gathered the documents into a neat pile. "There's more. I had my team dig into Grace's foundation activities. The charitable works and fundraisers are legitimate on the surface, but there's a pattern of inconsistencies in the financial records." "Show me," Alexander demanded. Daniel pulled up several spreadsheets on his computer. "See these donations to various Swiss medical research facilities. Individually, they're unremarkable. But when you look at the total flow of money over time," Alexander concluded, "it needs a forensic accountant. I know someone. Natalie Banks, a former FBI agent, specializes in following complex financial trails." Daniel wrote down a number. "But Alex, before you go further, have you considered what this might mean for your family?" "For the twins?" Alexander's expression hardened. "They're not my family if what I suspect is true. And the twins," he stood, straightening his suit jacket, "if they're willing participants in this deception, they'll face the consequences along with their mother." Later that day, Alexander met Natalie Banks in a private room at his club. The former FBI agent's reputation for thoroughness was well known in certain circles. "Your friend Daniel explained the situation," Natalie said, accepting a glass of water. "I've reviewed the preliminary financial data. Your wife's foundation has moved approximately $50 million through various Swiss accounts over 15 years. Can you trace the end recipients?" Given time and resources, yes, Natalie replied, opening her laptop to display a series of transactions. The foundation makes regular donations to medical research facilities across Switzerland. Small amounts, carefully distributed. But when you add them up, Alexander absorbed the information with frightening calm. And the twins' involvement with the foundation. Their volunteer work involves regular video calls to Switzerland. I've managed to trace some of them. Natalie's expression was grave. Mr. Thorne, these aren't normal mentorship calls. Alexander had his security team install cutting-edge surveillance equipment throughout the mansion. He needed to hear these conversations for himself, to understand the depth of the deception. Megan Foster's hands trembled as she placed the USB drive on Alexander's desk. The junior foundation employee looked painfully out of place in his opulent office. Her department store outfit was a sharp contrast to the bespoke surroundings. I shouldn't be here, she whispered, glancing nervously at the door. If Mrs. Thorne finds out. She won't, Alexander assured her gently, his voice calm despite the predatory gleam in his eyes. Tell me what you found. After Mrs. Thorne fired my sister, she forgot to revoke my access to the foundation's backup servers. Megan swallowed hard. I was only looking because something didn't seem right about the video calls. Alexander inserted the drive into his laptop. And what did you find? Recordings, hundreds of them. Video calls between Mrs. Thorne and Dr. Richard Sterling. He runs the Swiss clinic. Megan's voice dropped even lower. They've known each other since medical school. They were involved. Alexander's fingers moved across the keyboard, opening files. The first video showed Grace in her foundation office, speaking to a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and aristocratic features. The latest tests confirm it, Grace was saying. The genetic modifications are holding perfectly. No one suspects a thing. Sterling's accent held traces of both British and Swiss education. And Alexander? No suspicions. Grace's laugh held genuine amusement. Darling, he sees what he wants to see. A beautiful wife. Perfect children. My father was the only one who might have figured it out. And well, nature took care of that problem for us. Alexander's knuckles whitened on the desk, but his voice remained steady. There's more. Megan nodded. They talk about other families, other children. Dr. Sterling has been doing this for years, using genetic manipulation during IVF to create children who look enough like their supposed fathers to avoid suspicion. But they're all his, all part of what he calls his legacy. And my wife. What's her role in this? Alexander asked. She's his star operative, the most successful one. Megan looked sick. There are others like her, placed with wealthy families across Europe and Asia. But Mrs. Thorne, she was special to him. His perfect creation. Alexander opened another file. This one showed Sterling in what appeared to be a laboratory, speaking to someone off-camera. The Thorne genetics were particularly challenging to work with, he was saying. But Grace's own genetic structure proved remarkably adaptable. The children have enough of their mother's features to explain any deviation from the father's appearance, yet carry my superior genetic markers. The next recording made Alexander's blood freeze. The twins, his children, no, Sterling's children, were in their private gym, speaking to their biological father via video call. Dad's such an idiot. Olivia laughed while adjusting her yoga mat. He actually believes Mom's prenatal DNA test was real. You're our real dad. Liam retorted. Now, Sterling chided, though his pride was evident. Your mother has worked very hard to maintain this illusion. We mustn't be careless now. Liam, doing bicep curls with casual arrogance, joined in. Mom says once we get the inheritance, we'll finally move to your estate in Switzerland. No more pretending. Soon, Sterling promised. Just maintain the grieving grandchildren act a little longer. Alexander closed the laptop with deliberate calm. Thank you, Megan. You've been very helpful. After Megan left, Alexander poured himself 3 fingers of his father's old scotch. 17 years of lies. A wife who had never loved him. Children engineered to deceive him. A father murdered for discovering the truth. His phone buzzed. A message from Grace, requesting his presence at a foundation event that evening. The perfect wife, maintaining her perfect facade. Alexander stared at the message. The truth of his situation was finally clear. His entire family was a carefully constructed lie designed to steal not just his fortune, but his very identity as a father. The scotch burned going down, but not as much as the betrayal burning in his chest. Alexander Thorne's private conference room buzzed with controlled energy as his assembled team reviewed their assignments. The glass table held laptops, tablets, and stacks of documents, weapons of a different sort for the war ahead. Sterling's operation goes deeper than we initially thought, Harrison Wells said, projecting a series of photographs onto the wall screen. I've identified at least 8 other families across Europe and Asia with similar patterns. Wealthy patriarchs, beautiful wives appearing seemingly out of nowhere, children with subtle genetic inconsistencies. Jason Kruz, the former Delta Force operator, studied the images with military precision. The security setup at these estates is interesting. Multiple accidental deaths, all with the same signature. Professional work disguised as household accidents or medical emergencies, just like my father's death. Alexander said, his voice carrying the weight of cold certainty. Exactly like your father's death. Harrison confirmed. The toxicology report showed nothing unusual. But the timing? What about the financial trails? Alexander turned to Natalie Banks, who was cross-referencing data on multiple screens. I've mapped the complete network, Natalie said, bringing up a complex diagram. Grace's foundation isn't unique. Each of Sterling's operatives runs a similar charitable organization. The money moves through a web of Swiss accounts, eventually consolidating in hidden holdings. We're still tracing it. Alexander's finger traced a particular line of transactions. Show me the pattern again. First, the wife establishes legitimacy through charitable work. Then, small regular transfers begin, usually medical research donations. After the husband's death, larger sums move through emergency relief funds. Finally, once the children are eliminated, everything transfers to privately held accounts. The perfect scheme, Daniel Morrison commented from his position near the window. By the time anyone might notice, the money's gone. A knock at the door interrupted them. Megan Foster entered, carrying a fresh set of files. Dr. Sullivan is here. Dr. Amanda Sullivan strode into the room with the confidence of someone used to commanding medical teams. Her reputation and genetic research matched Sterling's, though her methods remained ethical. I've reviewed the twins' medical records, she announced without preamble. Sterling's work is brilliant in a horrifically unethical way. He's managed to create children who present enough physical markers to pass as their supposed fathers, while carrying his superior genetic profile. Alexander's expression remained neutral. Can you prove it? With the right test, yes. But more importantly, I can prove he's done this before. Amanda spread out her research papers. I've been tracking his work for years. Always the same pattern. Genetic manipulation during IVF. Creating children who seem to match their supposed fathers, while actually carrying Sterling's DNA. He calls it his legacy project. How many others? Alexander asked. At least a dozen confirmed cases. Always old money families, always using sophisticated genetic manipulation to avoid detection. Amanda's eyes blazed with professional indignation. He's perverted everything legitimate genetic research stands for. The Foundation's server access is still working, Megan added. My sister Rachel has started her job at Sterling's clinic. She's already identified 3 other couples in the program. Alexander absorbed this information with predatory focus. Harrison, I want complete backgrounds on every family Sterling has targeted. Jason, analyze every suspicious death in their circles. Natalie, freeze any accounts you can link to this operation. What about Grace? Daniel asked carefully. Let her think she's winning. Alexander replied, his smile holding no warmth. Megan, maintain your normal routine at the foundation. Feed them exactly what we discuss. And Rachel stays in place at the clinic. We need eyes inside Sterling's operation. Amanda cautioned, she'll be taking a significant risk. Everyone here is taking risks, Alexander replied. Sterling and Grace didn't just steal my money or my name. They murdered my father, corrupted my legacy, and planned to kill my... He paused, correcting himself. The twins. Everything they built will burn. The meeting continued late into the night, each team member refining their role in the operation. Alexander watched them work, his mind already moving to the next phase. Grace had played a long game, minus 17 years in the making. His response would be shorter, but far more devastating. Daniel Morrison's office had become their strategic headquarters. Its century-old walls ensured their privacy as they executed each phase of Alexander's plan. The asset restructuring is complete, Daniel reported, displaying complex financial diagrams. We've created a network of trusts and foundations so intricate that even I have trouble following it. Grace's financial team is already trying to map the new structure. Alexander studied the flow of assets. They'll find exactly what we want them to find. He looked at Natalie. Your analysts are falling for it beautifully. Natalie, the former FBI agent, confirmed. They think they're tracking your real asset movements, but they're actually following a carefully constructed trail of breadcrumbs. Victoria Hayes, the former MI6 operative brought in to handle counterintelligence, manipulated data on her laptop. We've identified 3 previous cases in Europe, Victoria announced. Each followed the same sequence. Once the inheritance transferred, Sterling's progeny died in apparently unrelated accidents. The mothers inherited everything, then disappeared into his organization. Show me the details, Alexander demanded. Victoria projected 3 case files. Thomas Rothschild, aged 19, skiing accident in the Alps. Maria Visconti, 17, drowning in the Mediterranean. Henrik Larsson, 21, car crash in Stockholm. All after their fathers' deaths, all leaving their mothers as sole heirs. And Grace is scheduled to be his 4th success. Daniel concluded. Not just Grace, Victoria corrected. We've identified members of Sterling's kill team already in place. Your wife's new security personnel, professional assassins with links to 3 other accidents in Sterling's organization. Alexander's expression darkened. The twins? Expendable. Once you're eliminated and the inheritance transfers, they'll be next. Sterling doesn't leave loose ends. He's already positioning his pieces, Victoria confirmed. Jason Cruz interjected. The new security team has been mapping your routines, identifying vulnerabilities. They're particularly interested in your climbing equipment. A climbing accident, mused Alexander. Clean. Explicable. Difficult to prove as murder. Grace has been researching Swiss resorts, Natalie added. Specifically, ones with challenging mountain trails and limited surveillance. Alexander turned to Daniel. How many others are trapped in Sterling's web? We've identified 23 potential targets across 3 continents, old money families, all approached by Sterling's organization through charitable connections. 6 are already in advanced stages, Daniel reported. Amanda's team was documenting everything. Every genetic manipulation, every financial transaction, every suspicious death. When we move, we'll have enough evidence to destroy his entire network. And Grace? Daniel asked. She's getting impatient with the delays in accessing your father's assets. Alexander's smile was predatory. Then let's help her accelerate her plans. Victoria, leak information about a new genetic testing breakthrough through my biotech connections. Make Sterling nervous about potential detection. How public should we make it? Victoria queried. Enough to rattle him, but not enough to spook him completely. We want him to move faster, to make mistakes. Alexander ordered. The team worked through the night, setting each piece of their counterstrike in motion. Alexander watched them with cold satisfaction. Grace and Sterling had orchestrated their scheme over decades. He would destroy them in weeks. His apparent spiral into depression was carefully calculated. He showed up late to board meetings, canceled social engagements, and made public scenes about his father's death. Each display was meticulously designed to convince Grace and Sterling that their plan was working. "Darling, you're working too hard," Grace said one evening as she entered his study. "You need a break. Why don't we take that family vacation we discussed? Switzerland has lovely resorts this time of year." Alexander looked up from his laptop, the whiskey glass at his elbow in plain view. "Switzerland. The foundation is opening a new office there. We could combine business with pleasure." Grace perched on his desk, every movement designed to distract. "The twins would love it. They've been so worried about you." "Have they?" Alexander's voice carried just the right note of bitterness. "They seem more interested in their phones than in their grieving father. They're teenagers, darling. They process things differently." Grace's hand touched his shoulder. "The mountain air would do us all good. There's a lovely resort with excellent climbing facilities." From his surveillance feed, Jason Krause watched the interaction. "She's pushing harder now," he reported to Victoria. "The leak about genetic testing advances has them spooked." Victoria nodded, monitoring other feeds. Sterling's booked a flight to New York, under the cover of a medical conference. The twins have already arranged to meet him. The security team had tracked Olivia and Liam's supposedly secret meeting with Sterling at his hotel. Every conversation was recorded, every DNA trace collected by Amanda's team for testing. "Your father's becoming unstable," Sterling had told the twins in one recorded meeting. "The sooner we move, the better for everyone. Mom's planned everything." Olivia assured him, "He's drinking more, taking stupid risks. No one will question a climbing accident." And afterward, Liam asked, "When do we join you in Switzerland?" Sterling's pause was almost imperceptible. "Soon, children. Everything's been arranged for your comfort." In the surveillance van, Victoria turned to Jason. "He's lying to them. The kill team's already in position for their accidents." "Like father, like children," Jason commented grimly. All of them were playing their parts in this dance. Alexander received their reports with cold satisfaction. The next morning, he appeared hungover at an emergency board meeting, ranting about conspiracies and betrayals. His performance was pitch perfect, a powerful man cracking under grief and pressure. "Grace, the board is concerned, darling. Perhaps we should move up our Swiss trip. Give you time to rest and recover." Grace's tone was soothing. "Switzerland," Alexander muttered, running a hand through his deliberately disheveled hair. "Yes, maybe you're right. The mountains. Dad always loved the mountains." Victoria's team intercepted an encrypted message from Grace to Sterling that evening. "He's ready. Arrange everything for next week. The accident site is prepared." The next day, the twins made their move. "Dad, we want to help," Olivia said over breakfast. "We could assist with the foundation work in Switzerland, show you that we are not just selfish teenagers, but that we care about family time." Liam added with practiced sincerity, "Like when we were kids." Alexander looked at them with a bitter smile. "These children, engineered to deceive me, are now playing their roles in your planned murder, your false concern, and practiced manipulation. They were all part of Sterling's master plan." "You're right," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I've been lost since your grandfather died. Maybe this trip is what we all need." Grace's triumph shone through her perfect smile. "I'll make all the arrangements, darling. You won't have to worry about a thing." That evening, Alexander met with his team one final time before the endgame began. Every piece was in place, every player positioned for the final act. "Sterling's kill team will move during the climbing expedition," Victoria reported. "They've already sabotaged specific pieces of equipment." The twins' accident is scheduled for 3 months later, a car crash on their way to a Swiss boarding school. Grace's foundation has prepared press releases mourning the tragic losses. Natalie added, "Everything's ready for her to inherit both fortunes." Alexander absorbed their reports with lethal calm. Grace and Sterling thought they were leading me to my death. Instead, they are being drawn into a trap 17 years in the making. Maintain surveillance on all channels. When we move, we take down their entire operation. No loose ends, no escape routes. The team dispersed, each member knowing their role in the coming storm. Alexander watched them go, then turned to the photo of his father on the desk. "You tried to warn me," he whispered. "Now they'll learn what it means to betray a Thorne." The memorial gala for Charles Thorne transformed the Thorne mansion into a gathering of New York's elite. Grace had orchestrated every detail to perfection, from the string quartet to the carefully curated guest list of wealthy potential donors for her foundation's Swiss expansion. Alexander observed his wife from across the ballroom as she charmed a group of investors. She wore diamonds he had given her on their 10th anniversary. Blood money, he now knew, was funding her true master schemes. "Everything's in position," murmured Jason Cruz, appearing at Alexander's side. "Federal agents are in place. Every exit covered. Sterling arrived 10 minutes ago. He's with the twins in the East Wing, giving them final instructions." Alexander's expression remained neutral as he sipped his whiskey. "And our other guests, 3 of Sterling's previous victims, are here, ready to testify. Victoria has their statements recorded and authenticated. The evidence packets are prepared for distribution to every major media outlet and law enforcement agency." Grace approached, her smile radiant. "Darling, it's time for my presentation. The Foundation's board is so excited about our Swiss expansion." Alexander took her hand, playing his role one final time. "Lead the way, my love." The ballroom's lights dimmed as Grace took the podium. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the Foundation's logo, a double helix wrapped around the world. "Distinguished guests," Grace began, "tonight marks a new chapter in the Thorne Legacy Foundation's mission. With the full support of my beloved husband." Suddenly, Alexander's voice cut through the room as he stood. "I have a different presentation in mind." The screen behind Grace flickered, replacing her carefully prepared slides with surveillance footage. Grace and Sterling in his office discussing genetic manipulation. The twins meeting their real father, mocking their supposed parents' ignorance. "What is this?" Grace's composure cracked slightly. "The truth." Alexander's voice carried to every corner of the room. "The truth about your foundation. About Sterling's genetic manipulation program. About the murdered husbands and children across Europe." Security teams moved into position as Sterling attempted to slip away. Jason's men intercepted him before he reached the door. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander addressed the shocked crowd, "you are witnessing the exposure of one of the most elaborate criminal conspiracies in medical history. Dr. Richard Sterling, aided by my wife, Grace, has been conducting illegal genetic experiments, creating children through manipulated IVF procedures, then murdering their supposed fathers for inheritance money." The evidence appeared on screen in devastating sequence. Financial records showing the money trail, DNA tests proving Sterling's paternity of multiple children, including the twins, and surveillance footage documenting the conspiracy, along with the assassins currently posing as my wife's security team, hired to ensure I had a tragic climbing accident during our upcoming Swiss vacation. Grace's mask shattered completely. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually, Mrs. Thorne," Victoria Hayes stepped forward, presenting a file. "We have testimony from Sterling's previous victims, 3 of whom are here tonight." A distinguished woman stood from the crowd. "My daughter died in a skiing accident 3 months after her father's heart attack. I've spent 5 years gathering evidence, waiting for someone to expose Sterling's operation." Sterling struggled against Jason's men. "This is absurd. I'm a respected medical professional." He protested. "You're a murderer." Alexander's voice cut like steel. "You killed my father when he discovered your scheme. You planned to kill me. And then you turned to the twins, who are to be eliminated as well." What? Olivia's face went white. Dad, Dr. Sterling, tell them that's not true. Olivia pleaded. Of course not, Sterling blustered. You're my legacy, my perfect creations, your disposable pawns. Alexander corrected, signaling Victoria. She played Sterling's private conversation with his kill team, discussing the twins' planned accident en route to the Swiss boarding school. Liam staggered back. Mom, you knew about this. Grace lunged for her purse, but Natalie Banks was faster. Looking for this, she said, holding up Grace's phone. The emergency funds you were planning to access have already been frozen. Every account, every hidden transfer, every shell corporation. We've locked them all. Federal agents moved through the crowd, making arrests. The assassins posing as security went down fighting, but Jason's team had positioned themselves well. No one escaped. Mr. Thorne, the lead federal agent, approached. We will need statements from everyone involved. This will be a complex international case. Alexander nodded. My team has prepared complete documentation. Sterling's operation spans 3 continents, involving dozens of families. You'll find evidence of human trafficking, illegal genetic experimentation, and multiple murders. He watched dispassionately as Grace was handcuffed. She maintained her poise until the last moment, then turned to him with genuine confusion. How could you do this to me? To us? Us? Alexander's laugh held no humor. There never was an us. Grace, you were Sterling's creation, programmed to destroy my family. Now you'll watch from prison as I destroy everything you and your master built. The twins, their world collapsing, tried one final appeal. Father, Olivia stepped forward. We didn't know about the murder plans. We thought you believed you'd simply inherit my wealth after your convenient death. Alexander's eyes turned glacial. You plotted with Sterling, mocked me behind my back, and planned to profit from my murder. The fact that you were also meant to die is justice of a sort, but don't expect mercy from me. As his false family was led away, Alexander addressed the stunned gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for disrupting the evening, but my father's legacy deserved the truth, and justice demands a reckoning. The scandal exploded across global media with nuclear force. Amanda Sullivan's research team worked around the clock, documenting Sterling's genetic manipulation program in devastating detail. Every major news network ran exposes on fertility fraud and medical manipulation. We've identified clinics in 6 countries, Amanda reported during an emergency conference. Sterling's techniques were revolutionary, but completely unethical. He was literally creating designer children, manipulating DNA to maintain plausible deniability while ensuring his genetic dominance. Surrounded by screens displaying worldwide coverage, Alexander watched the empire of lies crumble. Show me Rachel's latest evidence, he commanded. Rachel Foster's undercover work at Sterling's clinic had yielded terabytes of data, patient records, genetic profiles, procedural documentation, and proof of similar operations across 3 continents. He was building a genetic dynasty, Amanda explained as she analyzed the data. Each child carried his enhanced genetic markers, designed to produce superior physical and intellectual capabilities. The resemblance to their supposed fathers was just enough to avoid suspicion. Grace's attempts to access emergency funds had triggered alerts across Natalie's monitoring systems. She's getting desperate, Natalie noted, tracking the failed transactions and trying to access accounts in Dubai, Singapore, and the Cayman Islands, all frozen. The twins, now held in federal custody, finally confronted the full scope of their situation. Alexander watched their interrogation videos dispassionately. We didn't know he planned to kill us. Olivia sobbed. We thought we were special, part of his legacy. You were nothing more than tools, Alexander informed them through the interview room glass, his tone cold and unyielding. Engineered, deployed, and scheduled for disposal, just like all his other children. Your willing participation in the deception is documented in years of recorded conversations, text messages, and video calls. "What's going to happen to us?" Daniel asked as he reviewed custody documents. "They'll be given new identities and relocated to a secure facility. Their testimony will help convict Sterling's network, but they've lost any claim to the Thorn name or fortune," Alexander said without emotion. Victoria's team discovered that the first deaths among Sterling's other children occurred within weeks. 2 in Paris, 1 in Milan, as professional hits made to look like accidents. "Sterling's organization is cleaning house," Victoria reported urgently. "Protection teams are en route to all identified targets, but we're finding more victims every day." The genetic manipulation program goes back decades. Alexander activated global response protocols. "Get them all into protective custody." Sterling's entire operation burns, cleanup crews included. The investigation uncovered darker aspects of Sterling's work. Human trafficking routes through Eastern Europe, Victoria revealed. Young women, selected for their genetic profiles, were groomed to infiltrate wealthy families. Grace wasn't the only operative he had trained, just the most successful. Grace's own interrogation proved revealing. Her conditioning ran deep. Every response was calculated to manipulate, every statement designed to evoke sympathy. She told federal investigators, "You can't understand. Richard wasn't just creating children. He was engineering the future. Superior genetics, carefully placed to inherit and control global wealth. A new aristocracy." Amanda noted, watching the interview even as she knew he planned to kill her children. "They're not children," Alexander corrected. "They are weapons he designed." And they failed his mission. 1 year later, Alexander stood in the federal courthouse as Richard Sterling received multiple life sentences. The man's empire had crumbled to dust, his genetic legacy exposed as a fraudulent scheme of murder and manipulation. Grace's separate trial for conspiracy to commit murder ensured she would never see freedom again. She maintained her poise until the verdict, then finally shattered, revealing the programmed operative beneath the perfect wife facade. The twins, stripped of the Thorn name and fortune, vanished into witness protection. Their testimony helped convict not only Sterling and Grace, but dozens of other conspirators. Yet their letters of remorse went unanswered in Alexander's office. Another one arrived, Daniel noted, holding up a sealed envelope. Alexander fed it directly into the shredder. "They made their choice 17 years ago. Their regret means nothing." The Thorn Genetic Justice Foundation emerged from the ashes of scandal. Alexander channeled billions into genetic research oversight, working with Amanda to help other victims of fertility fraud. "We've identified 37 families so far," Amanda reported from their new headquarters. "Sterling's techniques are being copied by other clinics. This is just the beginning." Their partnership evolved naturally, built on a shared determination to prevent similar tragedies. Amanda's brilliant mind and ethical strength provided the perfect counter to Alexander's ruthless efficiency. Jason and Victoria continued hunting Sterling's remaining associates. Each captured operative revealed new layers of conspiracy, new victims to protect, new crimes to expose. His organization went deeper than we imagined, Victoria explained during a secure briefing. Medical fraud, genetic manipulation, human trafficking. It's a global web. Then we dismantle it globally. Alexander decided, use the Foundation's resources, find every victim, expose every perpetrator. Daniel and Natalie focused on the legal front, developing international frameworks against genetic manipulation fraud. "We're rewriting medical law," Daniel explained, "ensuring this can never happen again." Alexander's father's study, preserved as his private office, now housed evidence of victories instead of betrayals. Photos of captured conspirators, documentation of rescued victims, and maps showing dismantled networks lined the walls. A testament to the evolution of the Thorn legacy from victim to victor. "Your father would be proud," Amanda said softly, reviewing their latest success. Alexander's expression remained stern. "He tried to warn me." His death sparked this revolution in medical oversight. Now Sterling's victims will be his true legacy. The Foundation's work expanded globally. Every discovered case of fertility fraud, every exposed medical conspiracy, every rescued victim strengthened their mission. The Thorne fortune, nearly stolen by betrayal, became a weapon for justice. Alexander never forgave. The twins' letters continued to arrive, bearing different postmarks, but the same pleas for reconciliation. Each one was destroyed unread, their existence acknowledged only in court documents and witness protection files. Grace's own appeals from prison received similar treatment. Her perfectly crafted manipulations, once so effective, now died in the mailrooms of the penitentiary. The woman who had played the perfect wife for 17 years became just another case file in the Foundation's archives. Was it worth it? Daniel asked once, watching Alexander review reports of Sterling's dismantled empire. Sacrificing your family for justice. They were never my family, Alexander replied without emotion. They were weapons aimed at my heart. I simply turned them against their creator. The Thorne Genetic Justice Foundation became his true legacy, not children engineered to destroy him, but a mission engineered to save others. The study where his father died became a command center for worldwide investigation and rescue operations. Sterling's genetic empire, built on lies and murder, crumbled to dust. But the Thorne legacy, tempered by betrayal, emerged stronger through the ruthless pursuit of truth and justice. The perfect lie died. The brutal truth prevailed. And Alexander Thorne, once targeted for destruction, became the architect of his enemy's annihilation. 10 years later, the high-security wing of Bedford Hills Correctional Facility held its share of notorious inmates, but none quite like Grace Thorne. After a decade of imprisonment, her legendary beauty had faded, replaced by the hollow-eyed look of someone haunted by her own choices. She still asks about the twins. The prison administrator informed Alexander during his annual review of her confinement conditions. Every month, like clockwork, she attempts contact. Alexander's voice remained as cold as it had been during her sentencing. 3 attempted letters to Dr. Sterling and maximum security. 2 attempts to reach Rachel Foster, each intercepted per our Foundation's protocols. Alexander nodded, reviewing the security footage. Grace spent her days in isolation, her considerable manipulation skills now useless against walls that did not care about her charm. The other inmates, many of them victims of medical fraud themselves, had ensured her social isolation was complete. In Allenwood Federal Penitentiary, Richard Sterling's fate proved even grimmer. The man who once commanded a global genetic empire now shuffled through his days in orange scrubs, his brilliant mind increasingly lost to dementia. Poetic justice, Amanda remarked, reading his latest medical report in the Foundation's executive office. The genetic mastermind, losing control of his own DNA, had become a shell of his former self. Alexander and Amanda married 5 years after Sterling's conviction, their partnership evolving from a shared mission to a deeper connection. Their own children, conceived naturally and tested extensively, represented everything Sterling's genetic manipulation had perverted: genuine family bonds built on truth rather than deception. The Thorne Genetic Justice Foundation had expanded beyond its original mission, now headquartered in the renovated Thorne Mansion. Its global operations included the Charles Thorne Center for Medical Ethics, dedicated to preventing genetic exploitation, a worldwide victim protection program managed by Victoria Hayes, the largest database of genetic fraud cases overseen by Natalie Banks, an international legal advocacy division led by Daniel Morrison, and a network of legitimate fertility clinics offering free genetic testing and counseling. Jason Kruz's security firm had evolved into a specialized task force, tracking down the last remnants of Sterling's organization. Their most recent success had come in Singapore, shutting down a clinic attempting to replicate Sterling's techniques. 6 more operatives were identified in Eastern Europe, Victoria reported during their monthly security briefing. 2 of them were former colleagues from Sterling's training program. The human trafficking aspect of Sterling's operation proved more extensive than initially suspected. Young women, selected for their genetic profiles and psychological malleability, had been groomed for years before being placed with wealthy targets. Rachel Foster, now the Foundation's head of clinical investigations, had provided crucial insight into this aspect of Sterling's scheme. They weren't just trained to seduce, she explained in her published exposé. They were programmed to believe in Sterling's vision of genetic superiority. Grace wasn't unique. She was just the most successful model of his human weapons. The twins, Olivia and Liam, remained in witness protection. Their testimony had helped convict not only Sterling and Grace, but dozens of other conspirators. Yet their attempts at contact continued, each letter marking the progression of their lives. Age 18. Father, please. We were just children, manipulated by Sterling. Age 21. We're in college now, trying to make something of ourselves. Age 25. We understand now the magnitude of what was done to you. Each letter met the same fate, shredded on red. Their existence was noted only in security locks. Alexander's refusal to acknowledge them remained absolute, a testament to his unforgiving nature when it came to betrayal. The Foundation's success stories provided a better legacy. Daniel Morrison's legal team had helped draft international laws against genetic fraud, now adopted by 47 countries. Natalie Banks' financial investigation methods had become standard procedure for tracking medical conspiracy cases. Your father would be proud, Amanda said one evening, watching Alexander review reports in his study. The Foundation has helped thousands of families, Alexander replied, his tone as cold as ever. My father died trying to expose this conspiracy. The Foundation ensures no other father will face that fate. The study itself stood as a testament to both tragedy and triumph. One wall held evidence of victories, photos of captured conspirators, maps showing dismantled networks, letters from rescued victims. The opposite wall displayed the original evidence that had exposed Grace and Sterling's scheme, preserved as a reminder of the price of betrayal. Grace's prison journals, obtained through legal channels, revealed the depth of Sterling's conditioning. Her earliest entries still showed absolute devotion to his cause. Richard's vision was perfect, a superior genetic line, positioned to inherit global wealth. We were creating living weapons, not mere children. Later entries showed cracks in her programming. The twins write to me too. I never answer them. Were we all just experiments to him? Was anything real? Sterling's own decline offered no answers. His court-mandated psychiatric evaluations showed a deteriorating grip on reality. The children were perfect, my genetic legacy. Why are they turning against me? The plan was perfect. The Foundation's Genetic Research Division, led by Amanda, had discovered something Sterling never anticipated. His superior genetic modifications carried fatal flaws. His children across Europe and Asia began showing signs of accelerated aging and neurological deterioration by their 30s. He sacrificed genetic stability for immediate advantages, Amanda explained at a medical conference. Enhanced intelligence, physical capability, even manipulative ability, all at the cost of long-term viability. This discovery brought new urgency to the Foundation's mission. Victoria's teams raced to identify and locate all of Sterling's genetic descendants, offering treatment and support. The twins, through their witness protection handlers, received the same medical intervention as other victims. A decade of relentless work had dismantled Sterling's empire completely. His clinics were closed. His techniques were exposed as dangerous fraud. His so-called superior genetic legacy was revealed as a path to premature death. Grace's beauty-based manipulation techniques became case studies in criminal psychology. The Foundation's success attracted allies from unexpected quarters. Other wealthy families, realizing their vulnerability to similar schemes, became active supporters. Medical researchers, armed with new ethical frameworks, helped develop safeguards against genetic exploitation. Alexander and Amanda's children grew up understanding both the power and responsibility of the Thorne legacy. The Foundation's mission would continue through them, guided by principles of truth and justice, rather than manipulation and greed. Grace's latest prison evaluation suggested she had finally accepted the magnitude of her crimes. Her request to see the twins was stopped. Her attempts to contact Sterling ceased. The perfect wife, the master manipulator, the genetic operative. Every facade crumbled, leaving only an aging woman facing the consequences of her choices. Sterling's final years in prison offered similar justice. The man who had sought to control human genetics through manipulation and murder now struggled to control his own mind and body. His so-called superior genetics proved as false as his promises to the children he had created and planned to destroy. The twins' most recent letters arrived through their witness protection handlers. "We understand now why you'll never forgive us. The Foundation's work has shown us the true scope of Sterling's evil. We were part of it, willing participants in your plan to commit murder. There's no apologizing for that. We just want you to know, you're real children. With Amanda, they're lucky. You protected them from becoming what we were engineered to be." These letters, like all the others, went unread into the shredder. Alexander's capacity for forgiveness had died with his father, but the Foundation's work, protecting families, exposing conspiracies, preventing genetic exploitation, would be his true legacy. The Thorn Genetic Justice Foundation's motto, displayed prominently in its headquarters, summed up the lesson learned from betrayal. Truth in science, justice, and legacy. The price of betrayal had been high, but the victory it sparked would protect generations to come.